Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 11. Kylon Point of View. The atmosphere on board the Terran flagship was much different from my previous visit. The commander left me in a meeting room with 2 armed guards while he spoke with Terran intelligence about Eula's treachery. He claimed it was for my protection, but judging by their demeanor, that wasn't exactly the truth. The duo watched me with suspicious eyes the entire time, never cracking a smile or saying a word. Thankfully, Rykov wasn't gone for long. I couldn't help but notice his face was creased with worry when he returned. Whatever he had just learned, I had a feeling it wasn't good news. "You're back. Did they say what they're going to do about the sabotage?" I asked. The commander sighed. "Earth has bigger problems to deal with, apparently." My antennae twitched in confusion. What could be bigger than treason? They have to do something about the speaker. "They agree that something has to be done, but she's on their radar for other reasons," he replied. "She's been encouraging acts of violence against our civilians. There's been enough incidents the past few days that Earth has closed its spaceports. We can't risk a terror attack on our soil." Terror attack? I figured the phrase must be some Terran military jargon I was unfamiliar with. What does that mean? Commander Rykov's eyes widened. "You don't... well, it's a form of violence against civilians. Mass casualty events that are planned, done publicly, and meant to frighten a certain group of people." The fact that the Terrans had a term designated for such an attack implied that they had occurred with some regularity. I shuddered at the notion of civilians slaughtered in broad daylight for sole purpose of cruelty. For all the wars the Jatari fought in our early years, the violence was never so senseless. Yet the commander spoke of these terror attacks as though they were just something that happened, like a natural disaster. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Rykov scowled, crossing his arms. "Don't you dare try and act like that stuff never happens in the Federation." I shifted awkwardly. "Well, it doesn't. That's not how I see it. You know our embassy in the Federation capital?" He paused, waiting for my nod. "Demonstrators stormed it, took the diplomats hostage. Now they're holed up inside, threatening to blow the place to the high heavens if we make a move." "What? Why would they do that? Humans have been nothing but kind to us. There's no reason for bloodshed." Try telling that to them. The way I see it, they're terrorists. But that's still the subject of debate back home. We should be taking the embassy back, not trying to negotiate with these people. They won't even talk to anyone that's human. I could sense that there was something Rykov wasn't telling me. He cared for the people under his command and for the preservation of life in general, but never to the point where you could hear it in his voice. If this mission was personal to him, I needed to know why. He was a competent commander, but nothing could cloud one's judgment like emotions. "I don't mean to pry, but..." I placed a hand on his shoulder and noticed the guards tense up at the contact. "Do you know someone there?" Was it that obvious? "Yeah, my brother lives at the embassy. He works for the State Department," Rykov replied. I frowned. "Maybe we can help somehow. What are your orders?" Well, first they were to return to Earth with the refugees. I asked to join up with the tactical team outside the embassy, but was told, and I quote, "You're too close to this." The bigwigs really expected me to sit this one out? Orders are orders. We'll have to think of a plan after you get home. 2 steps ahead of you, General. I said that you offered to help, and that you asked for me to escort you to the embassy. It would be an insult to the Jatari if I refused. And what do you know? Permission was granted. You lied to our superiors? My brother's life is on the line. I didn't lie. I just stretched the truth. That is the definition of lying. Not the point. Anyhow, the flagship will set off for the capital immediately. And the other ships will bring the refugees back to Earth. I won't force you to go, but I would appreciate your help. Will you join us? There was no question that I should accompany the commander. It went beyond owing him my life or considering him a friend. After the Speaker's betrayal and the Federation's abandonment, the humans needed to see that they still had allies. They needed to know they were not alone. Of course, it's the least I can do, I answered. Rykov smiled. Excellent. Let's head over to the bridge and we'll warp out. The guards were at my side in a heartbeat, pushing me forward like I was some sort of cattle. My patience for the prisoner treatment was growing thin. I was keen on aiding the humans, but not at the expense of my dignity. I did my best to imitate Rykov's arms crossed pose, glaring at the one on the right. Hands off, I'm taken. The man's burly figure was intimidating, and I had no doubt that he could pound me to a pulp in a scuffle. I knew my rebuke might only lead to rougher treatment down the line, but I met his eyes anyways. I expected an irritated look on his face, but instead I saw the hint of a smirk playing on his lips. You managed to make Max smile, General. Even I can't do that, the commander chuckled. Max snorted. That's because you're not funny. Hey, watch yourself now. Rykov's tone was light and playful, so I doubted his warning was serious. The General is right, though. He is quite capable of walking on his own. Mac nodded, stepping back. His partner followed suit, dropping off a few paces behind us. My thoughts drifted as we passed through the narrow corridors to the bridge. I wished the commander would have dismissed the guards altogether, but I'd settle for having them out of my personal space. If the humans still didn't trust me, that was their problem. You look upset. I'm sorry. It's actually not you, Rykov said. I have round-the-clock security now. An anti-human extremist group put a 1 million credit bounty on my head. My stride faltered as shock seared through my veins. What? Why you? He sighed. Because I'm the one who fired the nanite-bomb. We fell into a comfortable silence as we entered the bridge. My mind was still reeling from the latest revelation. If there was a 1 million credit bounty out on me, I wouldn't trust my own crew not to take me out. For the commander to wander about the ship at all, he must possess unwavering faith in his men's loyalty. On my last visit to the flagship, the bridge had been swept up in a chaotic flurry of activity and chatter, at least before Rykov called them to attention. But today, the crewmates were already waiting at their posts, and the course was already plotted into the computer. Seeing the somber expressions around me, I feared the past few days had sapped the human spirit. Alright, it looks like we're ready. The course is already input for the capital system. Rykov nodded with satisfaction. Engage warp drive. My stomach lurched as the ship slipped into hyperspace. Even after years of experience with FTL travel, the nausea never went away. Memories of newly enlisted Federation soldiers puking their guts out floated through my mind, and I laughed to myself. The commander glanced up from his holomap, likely confused what there was to be amused about at a time like this. Before he could ask what I found so funny, a stern voice crackled over the emergency frequency. Turn back at once. Unauthorized Terran ships are prohibited from entry to Federation space until further notice. Rykov frowned, pressing a few buttons on his display. Since when? You do realize we're a member of the Federation, so I don't see how we can be denied access to Federation space. Earth halted interplanetary flights earlier today, and the Senate passed a temporary freeze on Terran visitors in response, came the reply. For all we know, you shut down your spaceports because you're planning an attack. That's ridiculous, Rykov protested. Look, we're here on a rescue mission. We're going to dock, and you're not going to get in our way. You are trespassing in this system. If you enter real space, you will be fired upon. What's that? You're breaking up. I can't hear you. The commander ended the transmission, shaking his head in disgust. Idiots. race shields to full power, and enter real space. I felt the ship shudder beneath my feet as it emerged from hyperspace, and my expression morphed into one of horror. No, you must turn back. The planetary defense systems, they'll shoot you down. I'd like to see them try, Rykov growled. Well, this was just wonderful. It seemed Speaker Eula might be getting her wish for a war with the humans after all. Still think Eula's a cunt. If you liked this part of the story, Chapter 11 of Why Humans Avoid War, leave me a comment down below. If you didn't, do the same thing. If you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you're going to bed soon, then sweet dreams. See you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 12. Kylon Point of View. The planetary defense system for the Federation's capital world was designed to ward off an orbital bombardment and consisted of state-of-the-art weaponry. This was the most heavily guarded planet in the galaxy, given its political and symbolic importance. With all of their firepower turned against a single ship, there was no way conventional shields could withstand the blast. I feared the humans had bit off more than they could chew. How would the Terran government retaliate for the destruction of their fleet's own crown jewel? It was unclear whether they would stick to the concept of a proportional response. An outright declaration of war could be imminent, especially if the Federation fired the first shots. It seemed common sense, from my perspective, that provocation of the humans was not in our best interest. Earth was signed on to, and in many cases, the founder of treaties that prohibited attacks on civilians. But if pushed to the brink, who knew what they were capable of? Just a single nanite bomb dropped against a metropolitan populace, the casualties would number in the millions. Not that I would be around to worry about the consequences. In a few moments, I would be vaporized alongside every other occupant of this vessel. Gazing through the flagship's viewport, I saw an azure glow spreading across the lunar surface. That indicated the orbital laser was charging up. It was capable of emitting the same amount of energy as a medium-sized star, at least for a few seconds. A hit that powerful would pass through our shields as though they were non-existent. Any hopes I had of escaping the situation alive evaporated. I thought they would fire the lunar station's plasma railguns or their guided missiles, as was typically the protocol for a space intrusion. The orbital laser was the capital's last line of defense, which seemed rather overkill for a single vessel. Was there any way to convince Commander Rykov to turn back? This is suicide. We must stand down or we're all dead. I hated the note of desperation in my voice, which crept higher in pitch as I spoke. You can talk to the Federation leader, work something out. The commander straightened, the glint of bitterness in his eyes. The time for talking is over. We've tried talking for hundreds of years, and look how well that worked out for us. The Federation needs to learn a lesson in humility. Look, I agree that this is an act of war. If I were in your place, I would respond in kind too. But you need more ships and a solid plan. Our deaths won't achieve anything, I pleaded. He waved a hand dismissively. I'm not planning on dying today, General. We'll be fine. It occurred to me that Rykov either did not grasp the gravity of the threat or that his recent skirmishes had led to overconfidence. Whatever fortifications the flagship had, there was no way they were designed to be subjected to such extreme forces. Warning, a target lock against this ship has been detected. Estimated time of impact, 5 seconds, a computerized voice said. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for permanent darkness to overtake me. The sound of trilling alarms rang in my ears, and I wondered if it would be the last thing I heard. There was no fear in my mind, just a burning hatred for the fools running the federal government. This loss of life could have been avoided if only the speaker behaved with sensibility. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. My eyes shot open as a jolt passed through the ship, and I nearly lost my balance in its wake. The lights flickered overhead, presumably from power being rerouted to shields, but that was the only side effect of the blast I noticed. There were no fires breaking out onto the bridge, no systems knocked offline. Shields at 96%, structural integrity uncompromised. Retaliatory action advised, the computer intoned. I couldn't understand how the flagship was still in one piece. That orbital laser was designed to overpower an entire formation, yet it hardly scratched the Terran craft. All it had achieved was a tiny dent to their shield capacity. Humanity's meekness, and why they had hidden their true nature for so long, was more baffling than ever. Their vessels were nigh invincible, and their technology outpaced the Federation's weaponry by centuries. What was it that differentiated humans from other aggressive species? They could rule the galaxy if they so desired, but instead they moralized and mediated. Commander Rykov cleared his throat. That was your most powerful weapon, General? You people need us more than you realize. I suppose nothing should surprise me anymore, I grumbled. What now? They're going to fire again once the laser is recharged. The human tilted his head, as though weighing his options. That station is remotely operated? A sensor scan of the moon detected 0 life signatures. Yes, to my knowledge, I answered. Good. In that case, we're going to make sure they don't have the chance to fire again. He clapped his hands together, a predatory grin on his face. Ensign Carter, ready the antimatter missiles. I want you to bury that station. Understood, sir, came the reply from the weapons post. I felt strangely detached, watching a trio of warheads close the distance between us and the station. My oath as a soldier was to protect and defend the Federation against all enemies, and it seemed the Terrans could now be classified as a hostile party. After all, without the planetary defense system, the capital would be left vulnerable to attack. By taking no action during this engagement, I was siding with the humans, wasn't I? The missile slammed into the lunar surface with a radiant flash, churning up plumes of dust and debris. Where a sophisticated defense complex once stood, only 3 craters remained. The aftermath was reminiscent of an asteroid strike, rather than a missile, given the magnitude of its depth. Staring at the fresh gash in the stony ground, I wondered yet again why the Federation was hell-bent on angering the humans. Creatures with such a mastery of destruction should be appeased, not aggravated, unless your objective was the eradication of your civilization. The low whir of machinery sounded from behind me, and I flinched on instinct. Whipping around, I spotted a robotic cart stocked with firearms wheeling across the bridge, and the Terran personnel gearing up as it passed by. Commander Rykov withdrew a scoped plasma rifle, and without a word handed it to me. Its weight was much heavier than I expected, and my shoulders sagged as I accepted it. Either the humans were sporting some sort of power armor, or their physical strength greatly exceeded that of my species. General, I think we're going to have to fight our way to Embassy once we dock. Between protesters and the Federation security forces, we'll be outnumbered, the commander said. You know the layout of the capital better than us. Any suggestions? I paused, tossing a few ideas around in my head. Well, a diversion would help. Do you have chemical weapons on the flagship? I assume the protesters are packed close together outside the embassy, so you could hit them with some sort of gas attack. When the emergency hovercraft respond to the scene, you can use them as a shield from the special forces. I expected the human to appreciate the resourcefulness of my plan, but instead he was looking at me like I'd grown a fourth eye. His mouth opened and closed a few times, as though he was struggling to find the words. "We're not doing that," he replied at last. "Please, forget I asked." Whatever his problem with my suggestion was, it escaped my comprehension. Not only would it minimize human casualties, but it would also provide a cover in a dense urban landscape. A wide-open avenue wasn't exactly ideal for ground combat and maneuvering. The flagship began a rapid descent through the planet's atmosphere, hurtling past silvery clouds. The computer's display stated that it had locked on to the landing beacon, and I steeled myself to face whatever lay ahead. As we neared our destination, I finally caught a glimpse of the ground below on screen. I had known that we would likely need to fight our way out of the spaceport before we could head toward the embassy. It came as no surprise then when I spotted the contingent of soldiers filing into the hangar bay, weapons ready. However, I had not been expecting them to number in the hundreds, and to be solely comprised of Xanik servicemen. This was no ordinary security force, and that could make our mission more difficult than expected. I just hoped Commander Rykov had a plan, because against a unit of that size, I didn't have the slightest idea how to escape the spaceport alive. That was Chapter 12 of Why Humans Avoid War. If you liked it, like the video, leave me a comment of some sort. If you didn't like it, tell me why. If you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you're going to bed soon, then sweet dreams. See you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 13. Kylon Point of View. Commander Rykov's orders had been not to engage the Xanik soldiers unless they shot first, but I had expected them to open fire as soon as we exited the flagship. Instead, they were milling about the spacious terminal, guns pointed at the tiled floor rather than at us. One individual immediately caught my eye. His striking dark blue feathers and pronounced beak suggested he was of noble lineage. Unlike the others, he was wearing his dress uniform rather than combat gear. I could have sworn I'd seen him in the media, though I couldn't quite place him. Was he some politician or general? If so, what in the stars was he doing out in the field? The human commander followed my gaze, and recognition flashed through his eyes as he spotted the Xanik nobleman. At ease, Ambassador Kazil, what is this? The Terran soldiers flanking us dropped back at the new orders, relaxing their stance. I stared in disbelief at Ambassador Kazil. Planetary ambassadors were only present at events of major significance, and for most Federation species, they were considered the highest-ranking dignitaries in their government. An ambassador accompanying a security detail to a hostile confrontation? That was simply unheard of. Kazil chuckled, a low rumbling sound. You want to get to the Terran embassy, yes? I think my personal security detail will be a sufficient escort. You're not here to stop us? Rykov asked, raising an eyebrow skeptically. Of course not. Earth is our largest foreign creditor, and also a major trading partner. It would cripple our economy for decades to go to war with you, the ambassador replied. The human shook his head, a smirk on his face. Let me get this straight. You're helping us, not because we're allies or because the Federation's behavior is unjust, but for money. Exactly. I see why our governments got along so well. A note of amusement punctuated the commander's words. You do realize that the Federation could go to war with you for helping us, don't you? War? With what army? If we leave, the other military species will follow, because you'll stretch a talon toward me. It seems you've already won over the Jatari anyways. You've turned the highest-ranking Federation general into your errand boy. My blood burned at the insult, and I raised my plasma rifle at the ambassador's head. Errand boy? I dare you to say that again. Commander Rykov reached over, prying the weapon from my grasp. General, I would appreciate it if you didn't shoot our only ally in the Senate. I clenched my teeth, feeling the veins bulge in my neck. Was the commander really taking his side? Assaulting the Xanik ambassador wouldn't be the smartest move, especially while surrounded by his soldiers, but his haughty attitude was insufferable. Yes, you should listen to the human, Kazil said, a triumphant look in his eyes. Rykov wagged a finger at the ambassador. Don't look so smug. You're out of line too, trying to get under a Jatari's skin. The general and I both have a score to settle with a certain someone. He is not my subordinate. Relax, I was just having a bit of fun. The Jatari are wound way too tight, he responded. Who is this certain someone? Well, our business with her is unofficial, if you understand what I mean. Rykov traced a hand down the barrel of my confiscated rifle, a dark look on his face. We want to track down Speaker Eula. That Duze? I wasn't too familiar with Xanik profanity, but I believe Duze loosely translate to intestine brain. She shouldn't be too hard to find. Eula's on the Senate floor as we speak, raising a motion for the Terran Union's removal from the Federation. The Senate is in session now, and you're not there, I grumbled. I had better things to do. Kazil looked at me for a moment, then turned his gaze back to the commander. Frankly, I don't know why Ambassador Johnson attended. I guess she likes listening to grandstanding idiots. Rykov laughed. It probably reminds her of home. In all seriousness, though, do you think the motion will pass? Does Eula have the votes? The ambassador hesitated. I don't know. There's a lot of representatives on the fence, but your attack on the capital probably tips the scales in the speaker's favor. Our attack? The Federation fired the first shots. The commander protested. It doesn't matter. That's not how Eula will tell it, Kazil glanced at his holopad, avoiding the human's gaze. Enough chit-chat. We should start off toward the embassy. Rykov nodded and handed me back my firearm. Our posse trailed behind the Xanik security detail as we exiled the spaceport in a brisk fashion. Exited, not exiled, my bad. A few humans stayed behind on the flagship to guard it, and if necessary, lift off to avoid its capture, but most of the crew had disembarked for this mission. I assumed for most of the humans this would be their first time seeing the capital in person. Even after hundreds of visits, I still found the city-state a sight to behold. In the emerald glow of the setting sun, the capital's architecture took on an ethereal quality. On the horizon rested the Hall of Governance, an intricate blue spheroid that housed the Senate and the Military Command Center. The rest of the buildings encircled the hall. All Federation species were given a stretch of land, with the founding members' territory nestled in the inner ring. Embassies were often wedged between shops and cultural sites, giving each region of the city a distinct flair. The Terran's Corner was famed for its street vendors and nightlife, but today, the market stalls were abandoned. A crowd of non-human protesters, numbering in the thousands, packed the street. The mob seemed agitated. Barricades lined the avenue to thwart their advance on the embassy. A wall of human police camped behind the barriers, pushing back any demonstrators who tried to cross the threshold. I say police in quotation marks because they were dressed head to toe in black combat gear, an outfit identical to that of a Terran soldier. The only path to the embassy was through the throng, and a few of the protesters had already noticed our presence. A group of them splintered off and charged toward us, wielding blunt weapons and makeshift projectiles. It was evident that we needed to get the demonstrators out of our way, or they would overwhelm us with sheer numbers. The same thought must have crossed Ambassador Kazil's mind, because with a whistle he signaled for his men to drop into a firing position. The Xanik soldiers found a target, talons hovering over their trigger. "Stop! What is wrong with you people?" Rykov shrieked, sounding almost hysterical. I offered him a sympathetic smile. There's no other way. Ambassador Kazil gestured agreement, looking baffled by the human's outburst. The commander wordlessly removed the silencer from his rifle, paying no mind to approaching civilians. He aimed the barrel at the sky and fired 3 times in quick succession. I winced at the unmistakable, ear-splitting pops. The protesters descending on our position scrambled backward, and I heard screams from the crowd. "The humans are shooting at us," one voice shouted. In a matter of seconds, the demonstrators dispersed, running for their lives. They scattered off into alleyways and storefronts, clearing the path for our unit. Commander Rykov sighed, lowering his weapon. There's always another way. A knot of shame settled in my stomach. If not for the commander, I would have stood by and watched a needless civilian massacre. Speaker Eula really could not have been more wrong about his species. That much was obvious. The humans had no desire for death, and the first thought was always toward limiting casualties. Whatever bloodshed littered their history, they had changed. One of the police officers broke from his formation, marching down the street. He pushed his way past the Xanik soldiers, pointing an accusatory finger at Rykov. "Why are you here?" I told Terran Command not to let you come. The commander gasped, staring slack-jawed at the stranger. "Pavel? I thought you were a hostage." "The agency has ways in and out of the embassy." Pavel unclasped his helmet, revealing a face that looked like a younger version of Rykov. "It really isn't good if any of us are captured." "What is the agency?" I demanded. "This is your brother?" Commander Rykov waved a hand dismissively. "The State Department, I told you. And yes, this is my brother, Pavel. Pavel smirked. "I know, General Kylon. An honor. And unless I'm hallucinating, the Xanik ambassador is in your little band as well." "We're at your service. On behalf of my government, we apologize for the Federation's recent actions," Kazil said. "No need. Since you're here, you guys might as well help." Rykov's brother gestured toward the embassy. "I have a plan to sneak some hostages out of the maintenance tunnel, but it needs a distraction." I couldn't shake the feeling that Pavel was more than just a State of Department employee, though I decided not to express my doubts. What common diplomat would suit up with a militarized police force or be drawing up tactical plans to rescue hostages? It was a relief that the commander's brother was safe, but something told me I needed to watch him very closely. I forced a smile, trying to act normal. "We can do that. Just let us know what you had in mind." That would be the end of Chapter 13. I think it's very well written so far, despite my severe dislike for that Eula character. If you liked the story, or rather if you're enjoying this so far, leave me a comment if you would. If you're not, do the same thing. If you have a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you're going to bed soon, then sweet dreams. See you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 14. Eula Point of View. I glanced at my note cards one last time as I stepped to the lectern. There was a strange sense of giddiness fluttering in my heart. With the Terran flagship firing on our sacred capital, the evidence of human treachery was now apparent. The most worrying part was how easily our trillion-credit defense system had been obliterated. If that ship was here to conquer us, of course, there would be little Federation forces could do to stop them. But given how humanity liked to present itself as a docile, peaceful race on the galactic stage, it seemed more likely they would attempt to salvage the optics of their attack. We needed to end our association with the Terran Union, while we still had the option. Senators, friends, I come to you today with grave news. I paused, my gaze sweeping across the packed auditorium. It seemed that all of the representatives were present, barring the empty seat reserved for the Xanik ambassador. Our capital defenses were savagely bombed by an invading Terran ship, which is deploying ground troops as we speak. For anyone who believed long-term partnership with humanity was possible, you can now see that their intentions are anything but benevolent. Jatari Ambassador Paulin rose to his feet, looking annoyed. If you poke at Garrett, eventually it will bite. You would destroy the Federation, thrust us into a war to prove a point? Madam Speaker, remember that you brought this upon yourself. Leave it to the military species to drum up to humanity's defense. Their brains were both wired for aggression, so no wonder they understood each other. Pelham's analogy was unfitting, unless his implication was that the humans were not sapient. Garrett's were a non-sentient predator species indigenous to the Jatari homeworld that had been domesticated to herd cattle. If I didn't know better, I would say that sounds like a threat, I hissed. This is not about proving a point. This is about a bloodthirsty species that has weapons that pose an existential threat to our society. If raising legitimate concerns about humanity and trying to distance ourselves from them is a crime, then I am guilty. The Federation will never throw its lot in with a planet of murderers and liars. Not under my watch. If I didn't say already, this is Eula Point of View, the character that I've expressed discontentment for. Many of the representatives were signaling agreement with their body language as I spoke. The Jatari ambassador appeared to struggle for a response before returning to his seat, shoulders slumped in defeat. While Pelham's immediate protest was no surprise, what was shocking was that the human ambassador hadn't said a word. A quick glance in her direction found her leaning forward in her chair, watching me with unblinking eyes. An involuntary shudder went down my spine, and I drew a deep breath to calm myself. Knock it off, Blaze. Stop. If you believe that a species we now know has a history of systemic genocide, bloody wars, and tyrannical regimes can change, then you will vote for them to remain in the Federation. I drew closer to the microphone, dropping my voice to a low whisper. All I wanted was for you to see that, for all their lies and grand speeches, they have not changed. It was always a matter of time before they would turn their sights on us. I was rather taken aback when Ambassador Johnson stood, slowly clapping. Her applause seemed sarcastic in nature, especially with the smirk plastered on her face. I sighed, tapping a hoof with annoyance. Ambassador Johnson, do you have something to say? It is your right to reply, at least while Earth is still a member planet. I have plenty to say, but the question is whether any of you will listen, she replied. First off, the missile launch against your defense station was unauthorized. You're saying your ship went rogue? That's not exactly reassuring, I pointed out. What happens when the next one of your crews decides to go rogue? The human glared at me. You directly provoked a civilian assault on our embassy, and yet you throw stones? Terran government condemns Commander Rykov's actions, but it's a clear case of self-defense. Show the logs from the station's computer, Madam Speaker. You won't, because they show that you fired on the ship first. A series of anxious murmurs rippled across the chamber, and I could tell Ambassador Johnson's words had planted seeds of doubts in some attendees' minds. I considered challenging the notion that our station had fired first, but I suspected she would not make the claim without evidence. If the humans persuaded the representatives that it was a case of self-defense, there was a chance she could sway enough of the votes in her favor. The civilians acted of their own accord. I simply outright said humans weren't welcome here, condoned a race riot, and look, you're not disagreeing that our ship was fired upon. I can see that the orbital laser launched one volley against your vessel, but they were trespassing in our space and refused to leave. You do understand that the highest-ranking general in the Federation was among the passengers, and that ship was tasked with transporting him to the embassy, right? You assaulted a diplomatic rescue mission. Are we really the violent ones? Said Ambassador Johnson. I could sense the balance of the chamber shifting, and I cursed under my breath. Human diplomats were known to have a way with words and excelled at backing their opponents into a corner. It was a struggle to maintain my composure faced with such accusatory rhetoric, but I knew if I lost my temper, it was equal to defeat. Yes, you are the violent ones, I said. Care to comment on your history? A triumphant smile inched across my face. There was no way the ambassador could defend her species' past actions, which by galactic law could be classified as crimes against sentience. Your so-called world wars and the brutal instances of ethnic cleansing. I've done my research since you launched that anti-bomb. Ambassador Johnson broke eye contact, a troubled frown crossing her lips. We regret those years deeply. Humanity had to learn the hard way that violence is not the answer, and we nearly destroyed ourselves in the process. For all the time you've known us, we have not been that species. I urge you to recall all the good we have done in our history with the Federation, not just the evil of our primitive years. Who accepts the most refugees of any planet each year? Who sends medics to help both sides of a conflict? Who sponsors bills on sentient rights and wrote the galactic laws concerning war crimes? I don't know what else we can do to prove that we are peaceful. You can stop building nanite bombs, for one, I said. We only used those to protect our friends. That's right, even after all this nonsense, we still see you as friends. The time for your games is over, Madam Speaker. We have bigger problems on our hands. Fighting a homicidal AI. Instead of sabotaging us at every turn, why don't you help us? Calls of assent came from around the hall, and I gritted my teeth in frustration. For every point I made, it seemed the ambassador had a pre-prepared response at the ready. There was no way I could tolerate the Terran Union's presence among us any longer. Humans were despicable creatures. How did the others not see the truth? Even after an attack on the capital. God, this Hewlett character's fucking nuts. As I was trying to think of a response, a panicked Tujili messenger burst into the chamber. Madam Speaker, please forgive me for interrupting, but you weren't answering your holopad. We are under attack. Hundreds of battleships are descending on the capital, and our defenses are obviously offline. You did this, I screeched, pointing at Ambassador Johnson. I knew it. The human held up her hands defensively, appearing genuinely confused. It's not us, really. What? Rogue ships again? Hundreds of them? I sneered. They're not Terran Union ships. In fact, the transponders identify them as ours, the messenger said. Pandemonium erupted among the Senate body, with dozens of representatives shouting questions at once. As far as I was concerned, humanity had to be behind this somehow. Perhaps they had hacked our military craft. I pounded a hoof against the floor, attempting to restore order. Silence! Have the attackers fired on us? Have they broadcast demands? No shots fired yet, but they told us we have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, he answered. I glanced back at Ambassador Johnson, trying to gauge her response. She was staring at the empty seat belonging to the Xanik Republic, as though some revelation had occurred to her. I could have sworn the words she muttered were, "Damn it, Kazil." The human hesitated, her gaze sweeping across the chamber. Her eyes stopped on me, and I could see the unspoken question in them. She wanted the satisfaction of hearing me beg for assistance, a groveling apology. But even if she had been truly unaware of the Xanik's intentions, surely their assault would force the Terran Union's hand. So, what are you going to do, Ambassador? Seize the chance to take us over? I asked, voice dripping with contempt. Ambassador Johnson snorted. You have a funny way of asking for help. A bitter laugh rumbled in my throat. Why would you help us? Because, as I've been telling you, we're not what you think we are. Now, I have a call to make to a certain commander. That invading flagship just might come in handy. She's got quite a few tricks up her sleeve. After a brief moment of hesitation, I gave the ambassador a grudging nod. A human gesture, which was a concession on its own. I didn't trust an offer of assistance from humanity of all species, but under the present circumstances, there was no choice but to accept it. It remained to be seen if the Terran Union would actually confront its greatest ally. But I wouldn't be holding my breath. And that would be the end of Chapter 14. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment. If you're going to bed soon, sweet dreams, and if you are going through or about to go through a full day, I hope it goes well. See you in the next one. Bye. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 15, Guideline Point of View. No mission ever went according to plan when humans were involved. Not that the plan was particularly sane to begin with, given that Pavel's distraction involved shooting rockets into the sky. I wasn't sure how lighting explosives was a good idea, unless the goal was for the humans to blow up the NPC themselves. But Commander Rakov ordered his men to set up the launch, seemingly oblivious to how bizarre his brother's suggestion was. How exactly is shooting bombs into the air going to help? I asked, unable to contain my doubts any longer. The commander chuckled. Not bombs, fireworks. I gave him a blank stare, unable to understand what he found amusing. So these rockets have a name. I don't see how that detracts from my point. They're recreational explosives. Harmless. Mostly. Recreational explosives? I echoed. What does that even mean? People shoot them off on holidays to celebrate. They're loud, explode in a bright flash of color, but that's about it. Come to Earth on Unification Day, you'll see plenty of them. That is supposed to be fun? Yes. Our species clearly have different ideas of fun. Well, fun or not, it should draw the terrorist out to investigate. I take it they'll be as confused as you are. A trail of orange embers arched through the night sky, resembling a cluster of shooting stars. A few cheers came from the Terran soldiers, most of whom were admiring the light show overhead. I winced at the volume of that burst. I wasn't fully convinced that the fire wasn't going to rain down on our position. The Xanik patrolmen seemed outright frightened, with many ducking for cover. Commander Rykov smirked, clearly trying not to laugh at a terrified Ambassador Kazil. Relax. It's perfectly safe. Kazil rubbed his beak nervously. Well, I'm happy you guys decided to join the bombing run, but I wish you waited until we weren't out in the open. Bombing run? Rykov and I asked in unison. You haven't heard? Pretty soon this rock will be joint property of the Terran Union and the Xanik Republic. Kazil glanced in my direction, observing the shocked look on my face. Don't worry, General. I'm sure the Jatari will be wise enough to jump ship. It seemed the Ambassador's implication was that the Terrans and the Xanik were teaming up to invade the capital. As wrong as it felt to abandon the Federation I was sworn to protect, siding against Earth in a war was tantamount to suicide. The Jatari more than likely would opt for self-preservation, as would I, which is why it didn't make sense for the commander to lie about his intentions. I frowned at my human friend. So you are attacking the Federation? Your plan was to take over the capital all along. Absolutely not, the commander growled. There's zero chance Earth signed on to this. Not yet, but we expect the full support of the Terran Union. Who needs to listen to those weak-minded Federation fools any longer? Ambassador Kazil flinched as another firework detonated above, but did not falter. Their wealth, their power, it is ours to claim. Surely you see the wisdom. The human raised his rifle, eyes narrowing to slits. Wisdom? I only see greed. Whatever you're planning, call it off. The nearby Xanik soldiers pointed their weapons at the commander in response, and the Terran troops readied their guns as well. I hesitated to join the standoff, but I figured I would get caught in the crossfire anyways. Despite the fact that the humans were outnumbered 10-1, I aimed my rifle at Kazil. I hadn't liked him from the moment we met, and I wasn't going to miss the chance to take him out. It's too late. We've broadcast our demand to the Federation, and if we don't follow through, it'll bring shame to our people, the ambassador said. If you do follow through, you will live just long enough to see your soldiers die by our hands. A new voice came from behind me. It was Pavel, who seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. We will overthrow your leaders, crash your economy, and fund insurgents. Then we'll claim that we had nothing to do with it, and your pleas to the Federation will fall on deaf ears. You'll never have a lick of proof that we were involved in any way. Fierce words from a diplomat of all people. Weren't you supposed to be in the embassy, freeing the hostages? Pavel inched closer to the ambassador. New orders came in. At first glance, Rykov's brother appeared unarmed, but something about his posture struck me as odd. Upon closer inspection, I noticed he was holding one arm behind his back, concealing an object from Kazil's view. The commander glanced at his wristwatch, hearing the chime of a notification. I just got new orders as well. This is primarily a civilian populace, and Terran government will not tolerate you bombing them into submission. Either you stand down, or I'm to take you in as a prisoner of war. We did this for you, for humanity. We were the first to stand at your side, and this is our reward? Kazil chittered. The Federation betrayed you. They are not worthy of your allegiance. Last chance. Surrender, Rykov hissed. Can't do that. Very well. Soldiers, on my command, take out all hostile forces. I want the ambassador taken alive. Commander Rykov paused, spotting his brother slinking toward the Xanik line. Pavel, what are you doing? Sorry, Mikhail. We have different orders. In one fluid movement, Pavel pounced onto the ambassador, drawing a dagger faster than my eye could track him. He sliced through the vital arteries in Kazil's neck with a clean cut, leaving the politician spluttering blood. Plasma fire erupted around me, and I pulled my rifle's trigger on instinct. I could hear Commander calling for air support, presumably from the flagship, and the Terrans troops relaying orders. A human hand pulled me to the ground, and I gasped as a plasma beam whisked by right where my head had been. I glanced back to see Mac, who was picking off Xanik soldiers with calm precision. The realization that he had likely saved my life was not lost on me, and I gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Drawing a deep breath, I tried to collect my bearings, acquire a target, eliminate the target, rinse and repeat. Simple. I spotted a Xanik soldier crouched behind a police barricade, propping up a rocket-propelled grenade. Time slowed to a crawl as I peered through my scope, lining her up with my crosshairs. Steadying my hand, I pressed the trigger. The round scorched through the flesh of her forehead, and she crumpled to the ground in a heap. An explosion detonated a few paces away from my position, taking out 2 humans. Clearly the combatant I had eliminated wasn't the only one with an RPG. Perhaps it would be wisest to move out of the open road before I was shelled to death. I noticed a small group of Terran soldiers off to my left, sheltering behind a market stall. Joining them would probably be the safest bet. We could hunker down there until the air support arrived. Rising to my feet, I darted in their direction. I'd only made it a few steps when a sharp pain tore through my side, and I cascaded to the ground. Glancing down, I saw a small hole etched into my stomach. The flesh was still sizzling around the edges. Blood spurted from the wound, staining my uniform a sickly shade of green. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey. General, Commander Rykov scrambled out of an alleyway and was at my side in a flash. He wrapped his arms underneath my shoulders, dragging me to safety. It's going to be okay. I'm here. The concern in his eyes told a different story. Your plans are all stupid. I coughed, smiling weakly. The human laughed, wiping away a tear. Yes, they are. I stared up at the stars shining in the night sky, admiring their static beauty. The chaos of the battlefield was growing fainter, as though my ears no longer registered the sound. It was calm, quiet, still. Perhaps death was not the fiend I feared it to be. I felt at peace for the first time in a long time, ready to drift off into the night. Darkness crept in at the corners of my vision, and then the world faded away. That would be the end of chapter 15. If you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well. And if you're going to bed soon, then sweet dreams. Leave a comment down below in the comment section for me if you wouldn't mind. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 16. Rykov Point of View. flagship's arrival was heralded by a wave of death. Its seamless blend of brutish kinetic weaponry and newfangled plasma bolts, moving down everything in its path. There were no pauses, no reprieves, just an unyielding stream of destruction. Bottled into the narrow streets, the Xanik soldiers could be picked off like fish in a barrel. There was something almost beautiful in its execution, in the same way an onlooker could appreciate a surgeon's skill in dissecting a patient. I was trying to forget the green blood drenching my hands and the lifeless alien body lying beside me, long enough to relay coordinates over my headset. Calling down fire so close to my soldier's position was, of course, dangerous. A single breakdown in communication would find Terran forces on the receiving end of the cannon's volleys. I was responsible for all of the lives under my command. For my men's sake, I couldn't afford to let emotions overtake me. Yet the unwanted thoughts crept in all the same. General Kylon had his flaws, but he had proved a steadfast ally at the time, when those were in short supply. I liked him, often considering him with the same regard as my own crew. It had been my idea to bring them along, and though I could never have imagined the bloodbath that transpired, I felt responsible for his fate. I couldn't let him die. The safe move was to sit back and wait for the dust to settle, but by then it would be too late. A silhouette flashed at the edge of my vision, and I quickly raised my rifle. "Don't shoot!" It was Pavel, who had a red-soaked bandage wrapped around his leg. There was a mix of human and non-human blood on his shirt, which indicated he was hit on the torso as well. "I know I look bad, but you should see the other guy." I gritted my teeth. I did see the other guy. That was uncalled for, and now my friend is dying because of you. I realized too late that I had referred to Kylon as a friend. Pavel's eyes flickered over to the general's body, and I could almost see the gears turning in his head. He didn't say anything, but his thoughts were evident from his expression. He found my attachment to a longtime Federation officer naive and premature. "Let me see," Pavel muttered, crouching beside the general with a grimace. "Downed by a single gut shot? I'll try to patch him up." My brother slipped a knapsack off his shoulders, retrieving a portable first aid kit from inside. I turned my attention back to the battlefield to see we could suture the wound. A large group of Xanik soldiers were sheltering in the lobby of a luxury hotel down the road. Perhaps they thought taking refuge inside would save them from the flagship's wrath. I ordered a bomb dropped onto the building and watched as moments later it imploded on itself, as easily as a house of cards. There was a grim certainty in my mind that that unit was buried, or rather, crushed by the rubble. With their numbers dwindling, I expected the dozen or so remaining Xanik soldiers to surrender to Terran Union at any moment. Sure enough, I saw a cluster of them walking backwards toward our front line, holding their rifles above their heads. The equivalent of a white flag back on Earth. "Hold your fire. Disarm and restrain them, nothing else." I spoke into my headset, shooting a pointed look at Pavel. "I don't want the POWs harmed in any way. Do you understand me?" I thought my brother was too absorbed with the general's injuries to hear, but he nodded in acknowledgement. "We're two sides of the same coin, Mikhail. We do what needs to be done for the greater good, and we keep your hands clean." I sighed. The agency had its issues. Uses, not issues. It helped present a unified image of Earth to the galactic community, when in reality, our regional governments still squabbled over every menial policy. It swept diplomatic incidents under the rug, like the time the HowTo caught a handful of our spies copying sensitive documents. It provided the foundation of our military intelligence, keeping us posted on Federation military capabilities. Not that we were particularly impressed. The Machiavellian attitude, however, left a lot to be desired. Keep telling yourself that if it helps you sleep at night, I grumbled. How's the general? To my eyes, it wasn't apparent whether the Chitauri was still breathing. The discoloration of his skin had turned him pale as a corpse, and I feared that he might well be dead. Your friend, Pavel lingered on the word friend, toned sharp with distaste, has lost a lot of blood. He needs a transfusion and a miracle. I only have human blood here. I frowned. You're saying he's going to die? I'd say it's likely, said Pavel. You can try to get him to the flagship, pump him full of fluids, put him on life support, but it's a shot in the dark, he replied. I sucked in a deep breath. Okay, alright, that's something. I'll summon a shuttle. I thought those were too risky to fly. The Federation could shoot them down. We just saved their asses. They better not. And anyways, we have to try. Mikhail, I doubt it will make a difference. They're not built like us. His heart is too weak. That's the problem. What if we gave him the serum? It improves strength, recovery time, and most importantly, cardiovascular function. You can't be serious. The serum was the layman's way of referencing genetic nanotechnology, which was used to enhance our soldiers through gene manipulation and regenerative therapy. While humans were hardier than most aliens to begin with, the nanites mending his tissues in real time were the reason Pavel was still standing, despite being shot twice. Genetic engineering was a state secret. Since it was prohibited by galactic law. Honestly, the ban existed for sensible reasons. The Federation was concerned about long-term impacts on a species' gene pool. Humanity wasn't exactly a risk-averse species, though, and was happy enough to experiment with the field on the down low. Earth's affairs weren't closely monitored, at least while the Federation had considered it a pacifist planet. I'm dead serious. It could work, I said. Think about this logically for a second. He's not human, and it's never been tested on an alien species, Pavel replied. We have no idea how it will affect him. It might even kill him. He's going to die anyways. What have we got to lose? Let's say he lives. You think he won't figure out what we did? Then he'll spill the beans to the Federation and we'll be right back on their shit list. Hell, what happens when he tells them we assassinated Kazel? Kylon's not loyal to the Federation. We can trust him. You think we can afford to take that sort of risk? We'd have to keep him on Earth permanently, to be sure. That won't be necessary. I think I can get him to defect of his own free will. Pavel's eyebrows shot up in surprise. The idea of the Terran Union recruiting a high-profile Federation officer to our ranks must have been sufficient temptation, because he began to rummage through his knapsack. He received a small vial of clear liquid, filled the syringe, and injected the general without another word. I wasn't convinced that I could follow through with bringing Kylon to our side. With how honor-bound his species was, it was unclear whether he'd even consider abandoning his homeworld. But what was important now was saving his life. I paced back and forth as I radioed. Fucking hell. As I radioed for Medvac. My gaze kept drifting back to the general, studying his form for the smallest sign of hope. There was no immediate change in the Chitauri's condition, but I hoped the serum could give him a fighting chance. That would be the end of Chapter 16 of Why Humans Avoid War. So far, Space Paladin 15, if you do end up seeing this. By the way, in case I haven't mentioned it, That is the username of the Redditor that created this story relatively close to 2 years ago. If you see this, you're an amazing fucking writer. For the rest of you, if you're going to bed soon, then sweet dreams, and if you have a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well. See you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 17, Guideline Point of View. Clinical death, a human phrase that refers to the absence of respiration and a heartbeat, what any normal species would simply call death. The human doctor in the flagship's medical wing told me I had no vital functions for a little over 2 minutes. This claim seemed impossible, given that I was very much alive. When I pressed him on how that was possible, he basically said they beat my corpse back to life, though he dressed up the concept with scientific jargon, chest compressions, I believe was the term. If that was the Terran idea of a joke, it wasn't very funny. That wound should have been mortal, but by all known medical standards, waking up in a surreal, all-white room, strung out on whatever drug cocktails were in those IVs, my first thought had been that I was dead. I still wasn't fully convinced this wasn't the afterlife or some trick of the dying mind. What are you thinking about? It was Commander Rykov, seated on the bar stool next to me, dressed in civilian clothes. The flagship had stopped on Luna for maintenance following our little adventure, and I had obliged his offer to hit the local pub. You're going to stare a hole through the counter there. I tried to snap out of my thoughts, sighing. I'm thinking I need a drink. He chuckled, beckoning the bartender. That's the spirit. 2 shots of vodka. The barkeep nodded, and she shuffled off to fill his request. I could feel a few stares directed at me, and I realized with a bit of discomfort that I was the only non-human in the establishment. I glanced up at the television screens on the wall, trying to distract myself. The sound was muted, but I could see closed captioning ticking across the picture. For Speaker Eula's resignation intensify, after internal memos disparaging various Federation representatives were leaked to the press. The source of this information is unclear, but she has, of course, accused the Terran Union. What exactly did she say? I asked, pointing to the screen. Sorry, I got the sniffles. Well, for one, she called the Auraktor ambassador gutless, witless, and possibly brainless, and then proceeded to say she would hardly consider his species sentient. You can see how that might be offensive. Might be? I'd say her days as speaker are numbered. I gave the commander a pointed look, crossing my arms. I'm glad your brother's friends exposed her. Rykov stiffened, alarm flashing in his eyes. I don't know what... I'll stop you right there. Yes, you do. I growled. Do you think I'm stupid? We all thought the Hadal were just paranoid, but they were right when they said your diplomats were spies, weren't they? Between us, yes. But it's best not to talk about this. The agency doesn't have rules, and it has ears everywhere. The human had lowered his voice to just above a whisper. I'd never seen him look this uncomfortable, which unnerved me as well. We need to talk anyways. Pavel wants me to ask you to keep quiet about how Kazil died. I told him we could trust you. There was an implicit question in his words, asking whether that trust was justified. His tone was almost pleading, and his eyebrows were scrunched with concern. I suspected that worry was for my welfare, rather than his own. If these spies would waltz into the middle of a standoff and murder a planetary ambassador in cold blood, I had no doubt they would ensure my silence one way or another. "You can. My lips are sealed," I said. "Next time, just give it to me straight, though. I don't appreciate the State Department BS." "I know, General, and I'm sorry. I had to maintain his cover, but I never should have dragged you into that embassy mess to begin with." "Wouldn't have missed it for the world. I wish I could have seen the look on their faces when the flagship showed up." The bartender returned, placing 2 tiny glasses of clear liquid in front of us. I squinted, inspecting the drinks with suspicious eyes. This was a rather small serving for an alcoholic beverage, but perhaps humans were more susceptible to alcohol's effects. After taking a single whiff of the drink, however, I recoiled in shock. It seemed that quite the opposite was true. "Is this diluted at all? It smells like pure alcohol." "You said you needed a drink. I figured you needed the good stuff, not just a beer." The commander downed the entire glass in a single gulp, then grinned at me. "Your turn." I hesitated, but swallowed the drink as the human did. The strength of the brew left me coughing, my eyes steaming from its intensity. I clutched at my throat as I felt the vodka burning a trail down my gullet. The only thing that kept me from pitching out of my chair was Commander Rykov, who seemed unimpaired as he caught me. "What is wrong with you people?" I spluttered. It seemed that my struggle had caught the attention of the bar's occupants, and many of them were having a laugh at my expense. Seeing the good-natured mirth in the commander's eyes, I couldn't help but crack a smile. I shook my head, trying to clear the fuzzy feeling from my mind. "I'm pretty sure that would be considered poison in the Federation." Rykov shrugged. "The Federation is boring. One more?" "I'm good. Your loss." I pried the human's arms off of me, trying to rise to my feet. The lightheadedness wasn't exactly pleasant, so walking it off seemed like a good idea. I only staggered a few steps before lurching to the floor. Reaching for the counter was to no avail. All I achieved was cutting my hand against its edge. I winced at the stinging sensation as it studied my palm. Pure shock rocketed through my veins as I saw the wound shrinking before my eyes, closing itself off as though by magic. The pain dulled into a gentle tingling, with the injury site feeling uncomfortably warm. That was not normal. Maybe it was the vodka? No, that wasn't how alcohol worked. If only I could think straight right now. I stared at Commander Rykov, hoping he had some explanation. There was no way I would have believed such a thing if I hadn't seen it with my own 3 eyes. A chill shot down my spine as I realized the human looked more alarmed than surprised. What exactly had they done to save my life? Something told me I hadn't been given the whole truth. Again. "What did you do?" I spat. "Look, it was my fault that you got shot. I had to fix it. I had to," he muttered. My anger was already giving way to confusion. "I'm sorry, what? I don't blame you. I knew what I was getting into. Now I ask again, what did you do?" We injected you with experimental nanotechnology." I took a few ragged breaths, trying to process the information. Humans weaponized nanites, then turned around and used them for medicinal purposes? The whole thing sounded both illegal and dangerous. Since I would have been dead without the intervention, did I really have a right to complain? It didn't seem to have done any harm. In fact, a sample of my blood could be quite useful to the Jatari Confederacy. I inspected if the 2 remaining military species wanted to remain relevant. I suspected if the 2 remaining military species wanted to remain relevant, we needed to play catch-up to Terran technology, or else the Federation might turn to Earth as its sole protector. Reverse engineering would speed up that process by decades. Right now, the Terran Union was a friend, and I hoped it would stay that way. But times and governments change, and being at the mercy of humanity's mood swings didn't seem like the best foreign policy decision. It was likely the Confederacy would try to step in as Earth's new trading partner. And after witnessing the implosion of the Xanik Republic, I knew we needed to take a more cautious approach, not get too entangled or dependent. General, please talk to me. Commander's voice was pleading, almost desperate. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. I dusted myself off, rising on unsteady legs. I want to know what your thing is with nanites. He laughed, clapping me on the back. You're a piece of work. I smiled, but my mind was elsewhere. Perhaps it would be mutually beneficial if we brokered some sort of under-the-table deal. We could advance the humans' research, offer them a generous amount of credits, in exchange for arms and technology. Now that I realized how fond the Terrans were of subtlety, I figured I just needed to get my government to join them in the shadows. I decided to broach the subject with the commander later. When I was sober, and we were somewhere less public. With any luck, our friendship would lead to a long-lasting partnership between our species, as equals. That would be the end of Chapter 17. Whether you liked it or not, please leave me a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you wouldn't mind. And if you have a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you're going to bed soon, then I wish you the sweetest of dreams. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 18. Biome Point of View. So why exactly was the refugee camp set up on a military base? I asked. Carl's face revealed nothing as he glanced up from his cards. Not everyone believes your little story, Biome. They want to keep an eye on you. Make sure you're not a threat. Wouldn't want you to try anything back on Earth. After the rescue mission on our homeworld, the humans moved us to a military outpost on a terraformed colony. From what I understood, its chief function was as a listening station, though it also could serve as a launch point for a preemptive strike if needed. They cropped up a tent on the premises with relative ease. A tent city on the premises with relative ease, and had ample food reserves to accommodate us, at least for a few weeks. Carl had requested a transfer to the refugee camp while he recovered from his injuries, which I was grateful for. I could tell a lot of the Terran soldiers didn't like us from their strained body language and curt replies. The 3 other humans at the table hadn't so much as looked at me throughout the game. I had only been taught this poker game yesterday, but the rules were simple enough. Trying to read the humans for signs of deception was another story. Honestly, this game seemed designed for sociopaths. Did their species derive pleasure from lying? With a frustrated sigh, I folded my hand. Obviously, you humans are much better at lying than me. Carl smirked, raking in my chips. You can't just let us bully you. Sometimes you have to call. Can I look at your cards? Go for it, I grumbled. Biome, why did you fold? The look he gave me seemed almost angry, and I shrunk down in my seat. You had pocket aces. You know that's good, right? Yes, but I don't know what you had. It doesn't matter. That's literally the best starting hand. What did you have? Carl flipped over his cards, revealing a 2 and a 7. I heard a few curses coming from the man next to me, and I was half tempted to drop some colorful language as well. Why would he make a large bet with such a weak hand? It defied all logic. Maybe I'm just not wired for this, I said. Hey, don't give up now. How about instead of worrying about lying, you look at it as a math game? Try to figure out the odds that someone has. A wailing alarm drowned out the end of Carl's explanation, startling me half to death. With its shrill pitch, it was unmissable. I covered my ears, but it did little to muffle the sound. Fear began to creep up on me. Nothing that loud could mean anything good. I glanced at the humans, hoping for some reassurance. They looked puzzled, yet I got the distinct impression they were waiting for orders. Incoming orbital raid. A low, mechanical voice confirmed my concerns. All soldiers to your stations. This is not a drill. All games and leisure were forgotten in an instant. The automated message hadn't even finished before my friend was tugging me by the arm, leading the way out of the lounge. I followed him in a daze. Our peaceful stay at the camp had lulled me into a false sense of security. Who would be foolish enough to attack the invincible Terran military after all? I was tempted to ask, but Carl seemed just as surprised as me. We exited the building with haste, and I took a peek at the pandemonium around us. Terran soldiers were nearly tripping over themselves, racing to their destinations, while the medical personnel were shuffling refugees off to a bunker. A squadron of fighter jets was already lined up on the tarmac, preparing to take off to the skies. The response to the attack was almost immediate. The humans could intercept the enemy before they ever reached the planet. I slowed my pace, trying to catch my breath. Where are we going? I'm taking you to the bomb shelter with the others, Carl replied. I frowned. What about you? Well, they'll want me there too, because I'm not cleared to fly yet. He tightened his grip on my wrist, wordlessly telling me to keep up with him. But I'm getting on a ship, one way or another. I'm coming with you. Something about leaving Carl to fend for himself didn't sit well with me, despite the protests of my self-preservation instincts. Maybe I was trying to convince myself that I wasn't a coward anymore. You need a gunner. I'm your guy. I don't know, but you sound sure. Alright, let's get a move on it. He veered toward the nearest hangar, strides brisk and confident. If anyone stops us, let me do the talking. A few shocked looks were thrown in my direction as we entered the hangar, which I ignored. The structure was packed full of spacecraft, which all looked pristine and well-maintained. Most of them had slim, angular designs, indicating they were built for speed. A few larger craft were present, which were likely the heavy hitters. There was nothing of the flagship's caliber in stock, but it was still a sizable armada. Carl steered us towards a skirmisher. He helped me into the back before climbing behind the steering column. It was a much cozier fit than the craft we flew before. As I fastened my safety harness, I heard the human switch on the comms relay, and a transmission crackled over the speakers. "Pick up, damn it! What in God's name are you doing?" an angry male voice said. Carl cleared his throat. "We're going to kill some alien bastards, sir." "You're not going with that thing in tow," came the reply. My friend's expression darkened. "That thing has a name. Bayam flew honorably under Commander Rykov. Rykov is a bleeding heart, and everyone treats the guy like a damn folk hero. He is a hero, and more importantly, he's a good man, but that's beyond the point, sir. I trust Bayam with my life. What does an extra set of hands hurt? We have plenty of folks raring to go as is. The first squadron is confronting the enemy now. This will be over soon anyways." A female voice buzzed onto our channel, which I assumed was the emergency frequency. "Sir, we've lost contact with our fighters." "What?" There was a pause, and then a measured response. "How many of them?" All of them, she replied. The man was stunned to silence, which stretched on for several seconds. Blondie, you still there? Carl frowned but didn't correct his name. Still here, sir. You're cleared for takeoff. Get that bird off the ground before I change my mind. Yes, sir. I shifted in my seat as our craft rolled out of the hangar, falling in at the tail end of the queue. If none of the ships sent out in the first wave returned, what did that mean for us? Were they dead? Would we be dead soon? I didn't think there was an army in the galaxy cluster that could trade blows with the humans, let alone annihilate an entire squadron. The thought crossed my mind that it was the AI. Perhaps it had learned from its defeats, and after sufficient study, it was able to replicate or negate Terran technology. That would also explain why a little-known outpost in a fringe system had been attacked. It was here to prove that no escape was possible, or in its words, to reclaim its resources. I tried to shake the idea, but the more I had considered it, the more I was certain it was true. My nerves were replaced by cold resolve. After tasting freedom, if only for a few days, I couldn't go back to life in chains. Death would be preferable. Sorry about tripping over my words in this one. If you liked it, leave a comment and a like down below for me. Subscribe if you will. If you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you're going to bed soon, then sweet dreams. See you in the next one. Ciao.